In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello everyone. Today we are featuring the Federal Aviation Administration, which is part of the United States Department of Transportation and known to most as simply the FAA. Our focus will be on the FAA's work here in New England. With us today from the FAA New England region are Dave Spencer, Cully Beasley, and Gail Luttrell. Welcome. Thank you all for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
There's lots of experience sitting at this table, so our goal for this show is to sort of get some information out there about your agency, what you do, how you do it, and what that means to the American people. So I like to start with some introductions. So we'll start here. Cully, tell folks a little bit about yourself, your background, your history with the FAA.
Yes, I began about 35 years ago in the beginning of the 80s, and I've worked at a variety of air traffic control facilities as an air traffic controller throughout New England, a number of years from Cape Cod to Providence to Boston and Logan, and spent some time in Washington, D.C. and a couple times in our district office. So my background's been in air traffic control, either as a controller or supervisor, and then most recently in the district office as the assistant district manager.
And what is your current position title?
Assistant district manager for operations and support.
Okay. And in what area or?
Yeah, we oversee all of New England,
Okay.
6 New England states. It's called the Boston District now.
Excellent.
And we, all the air traffic control operations, air traffic controllers and managers.
Big job.
Big job.
Big job.
And we oversee everything that goes on from the
Excellent.
air traffic control.
So we're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit. Dave, what's your background?
So thanks again, Diane, for having us. I hired in 1990. I came in after I was in the U.S. Navy as an electronics technician. I hired in the FAA as an electronics technician on the West Coast. So I've worked in a number of different regions, Western Pacific, Northwest Mountain, Alaska,
Wow.
and now New England. I'm acting here as
This is the best region, but go ahead.
It is. I have something to say about that. Currently I'm acting as the regional administrator. My position of record is the operations support director in Washington, D.C., which is essentially the oversight of the air traffic control infrastructure across the nation.
Excellent. And Gail?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm the the acting director of the Airports Division. We're responsible for the safe and efficient development and planning of all the airports in the New England region. There are 109 airports we take responsibility for, and we have about 3,300 nationally.
109 airports in
Yes.
New England?
Yes.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So who wants to tell folks, just sort of in broad terms, what's your mission statement, right? And how does the FAA sort of fit into the Department of Transportation's mission?
Sure. You want me to go?
Absolutely.
So the FAA is an organization that's comprised of about 45,000 men and women. We have 5 major lines of business. The Department of Transportation is the oversight organization for all modes of transportation, and of course ours is aviation. Particularly what we're after in the FAA is, quite frankly, aviation safety. That is our ultimate mission. Of course, there's all kinds of different hooks and handles that go with how we move airplanes and what we do at the airspace, but our core mission is aviation safety.
Excellent. So in terms of the New England region, being responsible for 109 airports. Organizationally, I mean, what did you say, 5 different
Lines of
lines
business?
of business?
Yes.
Organizationally, what does the FAA in New England look like, right? Most of us know, we go to Logan Airport. If you frequent the Burlington Mall, you might know that, there's some FAA offices pretty close to that. But
Sure.
organizationally, what do you look like?
So we look like, we have an air traffic organization, we have a safety organization, flight standards. We have an ASH organization, which is essentially security and hazardous materials, airports organization, and also a commercial space organization. And so here in New England, we have all of those organizations, I would say, with the exception of our commercial space line of business. We have about 1,350 employees in the New England region in all 6 states, as Coley was talking about. And then part of the largest organization, I would say, in terms of number of personnel is the ATO. And so in the ATO, there's about 35,000 people, both in air traffic and also the technical operations organization. So we're scattered all throughout the New England region.
Okay, so let's drill down a little bit, and obviously, air traffic safety of the utmost importance. What does that look like?
Well, in the air traffic control, controllers ensure that aircrafts are on the correct flight paths and they're separated appropriately. They're different distances airplanes have to be apart from each other depending on where they're flying into and the flight conditions at the time. So their primary responsibility is to keep airplanes separated. And with 109 airports, there's about 16 what we call contract towers, and that's where they're staffed with controllers that are not federal employees. They're under contract to the federal government. We have about 10 or 12 federal towers in New England, and you could have a tower like in Burlington, Vermont. You have a tower and then a terminal radar approach control, which is a radar facility that's used to track airplanes. And the word terminal is associated because in most places the radar facility is located in the terminal or adjacent to the terminal, so it's called terminal radar approach. In some places technology has allowed us to separate that. For example, Boston Approach, the radar facility for Boston Logan, is actually located in New Hampshire through technology. So that's the primary goal of the controllers in the controlled airports and the 109 airports. There's probably 80 of those that are not controlled. Just means there's no controllers in there, and aircraft that take off and land in those airports communicate with each other on the frequency because it's low.
So the position of air traffic controller, again, a critical position, important position, not a job for everyone, right? You need to really, be cool and have your stuff together. What sort of background do air traffic controllers, generally have, or do they come in and go through an FAA training program?
There's some background. Some come out of the military air traffic control. Some come out of the college training initiative programs. There's some college programs that teach air traffic control, and some that come without prior experience. There's a variety of entrants and applicants, and once they're hired, they have to take an aptitude test, basically a test measuring skills that are found in controllers. And once they're selected from that, they go to the academy in Oklahoma City.
Okay, wow.
And they're trained anywhere from 3 to 5 months down there on air traffic control procedures and processes. Then when they come out of there, they go to a facility, and depending on the facility, they will be in training to the local facilities processes anywhere from 1 to 3 years before a controller actually is able to work independently under general supervision. So the process is at a minimum 2 years.
Pretty
and
intense.
4, yes.
Wow.
It's a long and intense process.
That's incredible. So now, in your role, what's a typical day like for you?
I'm overseeing, at this point, operational events that occur if something didn't go right or it did go well, or we have things that impact the national airspace system, whether it be a weather event in and around Logan, or a special activity involving VIP movement or those type of things. So we have to be involved in how traffic gets rerouted and to keep efficiency going.
You're a busy man.
Sometimes.
You're a busy man. All right. Gail, we're gonna ask you some questions now. Tell folks about the your area of responsibility and what a day is like for you, and what individuals who work with you and report to you, what are they responsible for?
Okay. Out of the 45,000 people that work for the FAA that Dave was talking about, 550 work for the Airports Division. And the Airports Division is responsible for keeping the airport safe, making sure that they're planned, designed, developed, making sure that we take environmental responsibilities very seriously, make sure that projects at these airports go well, that they involve the community, that they involve the tenants at the airport. We work closely with airport owners, airport operators, with consultants and contractors that do work in an airport environment. We have a grants program, an airport improvement grants program, that helps to fund all these improvements. We have to keep the pavement in high quality condition. Airports have to keep their buildings in good quality condition. They have to train their people. And the airport improvement program helps to fund many of those activities. The program is about $3.3 billion
Wow.
nationwide. Of that, about 150 or 140 million come to New England, of those dollars come to New England annually. We break that down. Not every airport gets a grant every year, but every airport has the ability, if it's a public use airport, and it's in this, it's called the National Program of Integrated Airports, and it's the airports that are important and critical to the national airspace system. So an airport will come in, work with us, work with their consultants, develop a range of projects. It may be pavement projects, it may be others. It may be tree clearing, it could be expansion. We've done some projects to lengthen runways, we do projects to help people to become more compatible with a noise environment. If an airport needs to increase its navigational ability, it needs to get a better navigational landing system, we work with them to design and develop what's needed, how much it's going to cost. All the other lines of business work very closely with us as well to make sure that we're dovetailing nicely with those projects. So we try and keep an eye on the airports themselves. We're the two-dimensional people.
Right, right. Well, and that's so important,
Yes.
right? And I've certainly come across people who think that the federal government runs the airports, right?
Right.
That those are federal
Right.
entities, and certainly there's a federal presence,
Right.
and you go through airport security, and,
Right.
and the federal government's all over the place, but the FAA is not responsible for the airports. But I was not aware of that program where you really support them in a very, very significant way and try to make sure that they're that they're safe.
Yeah.
We actually have airport inspectors. If the airport has a certain level of certification, it's called a Part 139 certification, if they have this certification, it requires them to have a significant level of oversight. We go in and make sure the training is up to speed, make sure that the facilities, that fueling passes all sorts of our requirements. And we're inspecting them every year. In New England, we have 22 certificated airports. We inspect them every year. They are responsible for maintaining a daily self-check. We look at all their logs. It's a very significant program to make sure that there's consistency among all the commercial service airports in the country, but 22 here in New England.
Interesting. Air travel. I remember hearing like the safest mode of travel, certainly safer than driving in a car, right? Is it still the safest mode of travel? Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's.
In fact, we just finished celebrating our 60th year of being around, and one of the things that we take note of is in the last decade plus, we have been in the safest environment when it comes to aviation. So it just underscores the point
Interesting.
that aviation travel is still certainly the most safe way
So,
to travel.
so FAA's 60 years, that's pretty awesome. And has it always been the FAA? Did it start as the FAA? A lot of agencies sort of, go through these evolutions. They're part of something, then they become part of another thing. They get renamed. Have you always been the FAA? What's the history?
So before we became the FAA, the
Okay.
Federal Aviation Administration, we were the Civil Aeronautics Authority, I think.
Okay, that's
I
fair.
don't know if I have it
that,
right.
You know what? But that's fair.
And at that time, that authority was a part of the Department of Commerce.
Okay.
So as aviation continued to evolve, under Eisenhower's administration, that's when the FAA was born.
Wow,
So,
excellent. All right, so we've touched on 2 of the lines of business. So some of the other lines of businesses, what do you want to talk about?
well, I would say so. There's 3 other lines of business. So commercial space, right? So we know that that's an evolving technology, and there's more and more interest around that. And the key with that is, how do we integrate that into the national airspace system? So when somebody wants to launch a rocket into space or a vehicle into space, how does air traffic take that into account? How do we clear the airspace? Not unlike what we do with VIP movement. I mean, we have to create.
Is that the newest line of business?
I don't know if it's the newest. It's been around since
Wow, okay.
since I can recall.
Okay.
Right? So, and then we have our security and hazmat organization, hazardous materials, and so that's pretty much the security. Everything we talk about when we discuss security on the airport, security for our personnel that are working around sensitive areas, all of our clearances, those types of things. And then certainly we pay attention to how we're moving around hazardous materials from an aviation perspective. And then finally, I would say a chief line of business is our aviation safety organization. So really the FAA is set up into 2 parts, right? So the oversight or the regulatory part, which is the inspectors, the issuing of certifications, making sure controllers have all the training they have, technicians and engineers, and then we have the operational component. And AVS, that's our safety organization, they oversee all of that. So those are our 5 major lines of business.
So when I was, sort of looking at the FAA website, and there's just a lot of information out there, just everywhere I looked, safety, safety, safety. Does the FAA issue travel alerts or what on a regular basis regarding certain airports, or who issues those travel alerts that people see?
So when you say travel alerts, like whether it's a criminal or terrorist, or
Exactly.
So
Level of security at a particular airport.
most of that stuff, I believe, comes out of the Department of Homeland Security and the
Okay.
State Department.
Okay.
When it comes to those types of transmissions that are issued for traveling abroad, et cetera.
You have a lot of partners, a lot of different federal agencies that, sort of are involved. Who are your key partners? Just in terms of the work that you do.
Well, for airports, our key partners are the airport sponsors,
Okay.
owners, and operators. And they're the folks that, if we see something, we say something.
Yep.
If they've got a problem, we require them to take steps, and in a timely fashion. We work with consultants and contractors, general community. We spend a lot of time helping people to understand the value of the airport in their community. We spend a lot of time doing National Environmental Protection Act processing, making sure that when we do things, we do them in the right way.
And you do.
Yeah.
You don't hear too much wrong.
Sure.
I'll tell you, people in the
about
FAA
this agency.
take a lot of pride
Yeah.
in the job they do. A lot of pride.
Yeah, we also deal with the Department of Commerce, the Department of Interior, Department of State, Department of Defense. We have a lot of partners.
You've got a lot going on.
I can't underscore enough what Gail said.
Yeah.
The folks that work for the FAA, hands down, engineer,
Sure.
controller, technician, administrative assistant. I mean, folks have their eye on the ball, and it's about safety. And so, certainly our other partners are our stakeholders, right? So the airline industry. We touched on a little bit of the municipalities that we deal with respect to airports. So a number of moving parts that are going on, certainly with us.
So the real technical positions, what do those look like? Is it the air traffic controllers? Is that as technical as it?
It's a technical position.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a lot of technical training that goes in to become proficient, but it's not the only one. FAA has engineers that are technical positions. They have technical operations by its very name that provide a lot of, actually provide the primary source for maintaining all the National Airspace System equipment and keeping it functional. And you can step in if I
Sure.
if I
No,
miss something.
it's
And how big is?
That's your background. I'm talking
And how
about
big
it.
No,
is?
it's good. I like it.
Yeah. So no, I mean that's pretty
That's
interesting.
very
So
and I'll add on that at 35,000 employees, if you look at the population of the United States, 325 million, less than 1/10 of 1% of people are employed in this area. It's quite a people take pride in that fact.
Yeah.
That it's the not many people do it, not many people can do it, and so there's a lot of pride in that. So, but I'll turn over to technical operations.
Yeah,
in case-
so as I said in the beginning, so I'm acting here as the regional administrator, and I grew up in an organization that we were talking about, technical operations, right? And so within tech ops, there's essentially six, I would say, fundamental components to the air traffic control infrastructure. There's surveillance systems, so we can see the airplanes; communications, so we can talk to the airplanes; automation systems, so we can synthesize all of that different data that comes into us; weather systems. I missed a couple. Data. So there's an entire infrastructure out there that is both, I would say, legacy infrastructure that has been out there since the 70s or what have you, into our, I would say, emerging technologies that we have, which is things like datacom, which is essentially texting between the controller and the cockpit for certain types of communications, which frees up time both for the controller and for the pilot, so they can focus on other things. And you might touch on that a little bit later, but yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive system out there that it's all kind of synthesized together.
So you have a military background.
Yes.
Did you fly planes in the military? What
No,
did you do?
I was an electronics technician in the
Okay.
Navy.
All right. Well,
So-
that fits.
So when I came into the FAA, I did the same thing. I started out as a surveillance technician, which is a radar technician, an automation technician, and then just kind of moved around quite a bit.
There you go. Do you want to elaborate
no,
on,
he
on
covered
any of
that
that?
very
No.
well.
You did a great job. So I mean, over the years, you've again tremendous amount of experience sitting at this table. Technology is always changing, right? The new technologies, emerging technologies. What are the big things?
So with regard to airports, recently we completed runway and safety areas at all of the commercial service airports with certificates in New England. We've done it all over the country, actually, and it was completed at the end of 2015. And at some airports, especially in New England and on the East Coast and the West Coast, where real estate is a little bit more challenging than it is in the middle of the country, we've had to use a different type of technology. If you don't have enough land at Logan Airport, we're land constrained. So we actually the airport had to construct a pier on one of its runway ends to enable, it's called an engineered materials arresting system. And what it actually is crushable concrete. And depending on the design category, the design group of the aircraft that might be using that runway, the engineered materials arresting system is capable of stopping it
Wow.
in a shorter distance than it would if a standard real estate type of a safety area was there. And there are lots of different types of technologies, and we try to stay ahead of it, try to stay in the forefront of it, but it's constantly evolving. So we're always trying to make sure that if there's products out there, or we have different types of paint that are coming online now that have a certain reflectivity. In our office, we will speak with some of the developers. We have FAA Technical Center in Atlantic City, and they're constantly looking at fire safety, protection. They're the people that decide what types of things are going into the airplane, what types of things, safety products that aircraft can
So the
enable
FAA is
safety.
sort of, you're doing that. You're watching, the latest and the best, and now you mentioned the paint. Is that something you then? How does that actually play out? You pick up the phone and call somebody at Logan Airport and say, you need to do this by. It's required. It's optional.
Actually, what has to happen is the FAA has to approve a certain type of product. And the crushable concrete went through a process to get FAA approval. FAA has to say, okay, it is a huge safety enhancement and this is an acceptable alternative to the
Okay.
traditional safety area. So paint, we determined that having reflective paint at night on the markings on runways is a huge benefit to pilots. Went through an FAA process, gets approval, then we encourage the airports. And we make sure that they meet certain design standards. We have design standards for taxiways, aprons, runways. We have
Wow.
separation standards, just like in the air there are separation standards. On the ground there are separation standards depending on what type of aircraft are operating at the airport.
Any new products in the pipeline that quite haven't gotten through the approval process yet?
We have a different product that's potentially going to come out for runway safety areas, but it's
Still in
well,
process.
It's in process. And there are others too, but I'm not sure what stage of the game they're at. So
Excellent, excellent. All right, so before I jump to another topic, anybody else want to talk about anything we've touched on?
Well, I was just going to say that some of the, I might get all geeky here, but some of the changes I've seen just in my career, right, are the way we even see airplanes, right? So we had a typical radar system, right, that would go out and hit a plane and it would come back, we'd see it. But now we have the advent of GPS, right, and ADS-B, which gives us a more accurate accounting where all the aircraft are. In facilities that Coley was talking about, we have an ability today that going back 28 years ago, when I came in, called mosaicing, right, or fusion,
Okay.
which is the bringing in a number of different surveillance platforms, if you will, which provides the air traffic controller much better situational awareness, I would say, than 20 years ago. And I think the other takeaway for me, when we talk about what have we seen different, is just the sheer volume of aircraft in the sky today, right? I mean, we're running anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 operations across the nation,
Wow.
right? And when we look at the two big airline manufacturers, they're producing right around, I mean, I don't want to make sure, I want to temper this a little
Just-
bit, but
yeah.
right around 4.5 aircraft a day that they're producing a
Wow.
day. So globally, if you take a look at what that looks like, and then what that translation is to the number of passengers, and then going all the way back to, I keep hitting on safety, right? That's our objective, is how do we accommodate that growth? And it has been, like I said, in the numbers that I articulated, it's huge. It's
massive.
Quite a bit of growth. Yeah.
It's massive. So, I mean, in terms of all that, right, the bulk of it are the commercial carriers, but some of it, private plane owners, smaller planes. How does it break down? How much of that is commercial travel?
So when I say 5,000 to 6,000 operations a day, those are pretty much what we call en route operations.
Okay.
So I think if we do the translation to what does that mean for the private pilot,
Right.
I mean, there's still that increasing number of enthusiasts that
Right.
still like to do the things they do. Particularly,
Right.
I would say that's true here in New England with our 6 states here. So.
I could add on the most significant advancement is the fused, and that is taking.
Is the what?
It's fused, where you combine what you were just mentioning, several different radar systems into
Okay.
one. Before that, you'd have a controller at a radar scope. There's a single radar antenna out there turning, and so if a plane, it's line of sight. So after a while, the aircraft is not visible. Now you can bring in 5 or 6 different radar systems all across New England, fed into a single place, so you can see airplanes closer to the ground. You can see them. They're not blind spots, if you will.
Right.
So that's one of the most significant advances.
I mean, that sounds pretty incredible.
That with the
you have
computerization
extra
of the radar.
levels of safety
Absolutely.
built in.
And if one system happens to fail, you've got 4 others that are sitting there.
You've got all of that backup of
Yes.
protection. That's yeah.
One of the other things, we keep talking about this safety. We have a real culture of safety within the FAA, but we expect that our partners share that culture. And they really do. We've got more reporting of bird strikes, of incursions when perhaps a vehicle at the airport might get too close with one of these small aircrafts or something. They're required to report it, and then our division, the airports division, will go out and investigate what happened. Did they understand? Did they have driver training on the airfield? Whether it's commercial service or not, the standards are there. This is how you need to operate if you're on the inside of a fence. So it's very unusual for...
You know, again, I've been retired for a little bit, but I was a former federal employee for 37 years, and I had the privilege of working with some of the FAA leadership, a few regional administrators in particular, and I was always struck by the focus that was really spent on emphasizing that culture. And in particular, you mentioned the pride that the employees take in their work. You know, I think you had one of the best awards programs to recognize your employees, which is so important, right? You know, they're doing exceptional work. They're working in stressful positions, and that always really impressed me about the FAA. All right, so let's talk about drones. Did you get one for Christmas?
I did not.
Okay. Who's doing what with drones? Do you care about drones? Do you regulate
Sure.
drones?
So, and you guys jump in wherever you want to. So we have seen the increase in drones or UASs, UAVs,
What is that?
all synonymous.
What is
unmanned
UAVs?
aerial
Oh.
vehicle, unmanned aerial
I should have known that. There you go.
systems,
Unmanned
drones,
aircraft.
Yes, so
All right.
all synonymous. And
Right.
so I would say even in the last couple years, we have seen a logarithmic increase in the use of drones. Whether it's recreational for the 15-year-old that just got one
Yep.
for his or her birthday, to interest that industry has, right? And so one of the things that we have just launched is the integrated pilot program, right?
Okay.
Which is there is an interest in industry. How can drones be used in commerce, right? And so what does that look like for setting traps in remote areas, for instance? What does that look like for package delivery? What does that look like for disasters that we have, railroad track safety inspections? Rather than send a crew out there, how can a drone be used? So there are a number of different areas that we are integrating safely into the NAS, and so it's a very it's quite a walk, right, to do. And what does that integration look like, and how does industry, like Gail was saying, we're very connected with our partners, right? And so this is not only an oversight thing. This is also how does industry participate with us to come up with the correct rulemaking and the legislative processes that go with that. And then what does the oversight look like from a municipality, for instance, with respect to what do drones look like over crowded areas and those types of things. So the FAA plays a key role,
Sure.
but certainly not the only role as we integrate these newer systems into the NAS.
Makes sense.
Yes, I was going to add the safety component is where and how do you allow drones around busy airports or populated areas for air traffic separation purposes. So there is, you'd mentioned, David mentioned a website you can go to when you get a drone. You can go see, and there's a map that shows you where you live, how high you can fly it, where you can fly, if there are restrictions and that type of thing. So we certainly encourage people to look that up, because there are some areas you can't fly in around Logan and around Atlanta. Those there's a whole, I think they've finished now mapping the entire United States of
okay.
altitude and areas for drones. So
And if you're a drone pilot, you need a license? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting. All right, yeah, go ahead, Gail.
I was just going to say, we have a lot of other users of airports too. There are a lot of users of the airspace, to include seaplane users, parachutists, other users other than just traditional pilots. And that's the case all over the country. But
So parachutists, I mean, I wouldn't have even thought about that.
yeah, it's in use of airspace.
Yeah,
It's
of
public
course it
airspace,
is.
yeah.
Okay, wow. That's pretty interesting.
But we make determinations on where the safest places for them to land on airports.
Okay, wow. We've covered an awful lot of territory. What haven't we covered that we want to get out there?
Well, I said in the beginning I worked in 4 different regions, right? So,
But this one is the best.
well, and that's what I wanted to get back to. So everyone that I've worked in and around, they all have their unique organizational personality to them. And what I would say about New England is it's so across the system we're all very committed. What I've noticed when I came to New England is there is a sense of community or family here in New England. Folks have a tendency to know of other people.
Yep.
And there's, like I said, there's just a real sense of community here in New England. And I think that even extends to our stakeholders, our different congressional delegations, state, federal. So it's pretty cool. And it is a different region with a very unique personality, I think.
I think you've made a very accurate assessment.
Also, because we're so small, the 6 New England states, we can travel to all of these airports. If there's an issue or there's some type of a weather event, our inspectors go to the airports on the day of the event and make sure that facilities are in place. If there's something that needs to get corrected immediately, we need to correct it, because it's all the pilots are depending on those facilities to be functional. The equipment, the air traffic control towers, people expect a certain level of service, and we're here to deliver on the service.
Excellent. Anything else, Kelly, that we haven't covered from your operation?
No, I think so. I think we've covered everything.
All right. Well, you know what? That's wonderful. Again, I really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you for having
Certainly
us.
our thanks to our guests from the FAA for being with us today and for giving us a better understanding of the work that they do to keep air travel safe. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.